Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into a really fascinating snapshot from May 2026, and it reveals something absolutely crucial. Three global arenas that seem completely separate are actually fundamentally intertwined. We're talking about modern statecraft here, and how physical territory, digital innovation, and global finance are quite literally colliding in real time.
Now, you might be wondering, how on earth are 1939 British Handbook, Chinese AI tokens, and Middle East peace talks connected? I mean, at first glance, they sound like they belong in completely different centuries, let alone different continents. But it's amazing to see exactly how these wildly different elements come together to form the new global chessboard. We're going to unpack the source documents to find out exactly how.
To really grasp where we are in May 2026, we kind of have to rewind a bit and look at the compounding events that brought us here. Back in late 2025, we saw these crucial tech talks kick off. Then, by early 2026, there were some massive, undeniable shifts within OPEC. And that leads us straight into today's highly consequential diplomatic peace meetings. The pace of all this is just staggering, and it's all building toward a much, much larger picture.
So here is our roadmap for this explainer. We're going to tackle four specific areas. Front one is the shifting Middle East. Front two is the AI race. Front three is economic warfare. And finally, we'll synthesize all of this by decoding the inherent bias in our source materials.
All right, front one, the Middle East. Let's look at how the traditional power dynamics in the Gulf are rapidly shifting. Looking directly at reports from Chinese state media, Beijing is actively and very publicly positioning itself as a key regional mediator. They're actually offering to step in, mediate a ceasefire, and end hostilities. What's also interesting here is that they're publicly supporting Iran's sovereignty and specifically praising what they call Iran's peaceful nuclear rights. Their ultimate stated goal? They want to push for a brand new regional peace architecture involving all the Gulf states. This is a massive diplomatic play on their part.
But the reality on the ground is incredibly complex, and this really highlights the friction we're dealing with. While these broader peace proposals are being floated out there, independent analysis from Western media, like the New York Times, points to a fraying alliance between Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates. We're seeing them shift from wartime allies to fierce rivals. They are competing heavily in tech and finance. We've got the UAE making a totally abrupt exit from OPEC, and both nations are even backing opposing sides in Yemen. So the traditional Gulf alliances are essentially restructuring themselves right before our eyes.
So, what does all of this geopolitical maneuvering actually mean for us? Well, the crucial takeaway is that these conflicts absolutely do not exist in a vacuum. Both the US and China have voiced some really serious concerns about keeping free passage through the Strait of Hormuz. When these traditional alliances fray and tensions start spiking, it directly threatens those vital oil export routes. And that impacts not just global security, but literally the daily energy costs you pay at the pump or to heat your home. Security and global economics are just totally intertwined here.
Let's pivot to front two, the AI race, moving from physical territory to the digital battleground. $41 billion. Think about that number for a second. That is the amount China invested in basic research and development in 2025 alone. This is not just about building slightly better software anymore. This frames artificial intelligence as a paramount national strategic imperative. The leadership in Beijing is aggressively pushing to direct a massive share of that funding straight into frontier fields to try and lock down dominance. And there's this incredible tension playing out right now that is just fascinating. On one hand, according to Hong Kong media, you have Chinese President Xi Jinping openly calling for, quote, original and disruptive innovation to aggressively win this US-China tech race. But simultaneously, and this is according to Western business press like the Wall Street Journal, there are these quiet, mutual discussions happening behind closed doors between the US and China to establish formal AI guardrails. So we've got this hyper-competitive, almost ruthless push for dominance running totally parallel to a mutual, very real fear of an uncontrolled tech arms race. So how is that race actually playing out? Well, according to a survey published in a Chinese Communist Party journal, China's AI industry is absolutely booming. Their data claims that 8 of the world's top 10 open-source AI models are Chinese. It certainly paints a picture of near total dominance in that specific open source arena. But keep this statistic in the back of your mind, okay? Because we are definitely going to critically examine how this specific claim was constructed a little later on. Because despite all these rapid advancements, and despite those quiet talks about guardrails we mentioned, the relationship is, well, it's fraught. To quote analysts from the Brookings Institution directly, they hardly talk about AI, at least at the official level.
There's this massive trust deficit happening, characterized by extremely low trust and sky-high competition, which really begs the question, what confidence-building measures, things like joint labs or expert exchanges, could even effectively work when the two biggest players on the board are barely communicating officially? Moving right along to Front 3, economic warfare, where geopolitics and tech collide in global finance. I found this Bloomberg quote absolutely fascinating. Right in the middle of this era of insane digital advancement, policymakers are literally looking backward. They are poring over a 1939 British Handbook of Economic Warfare. They're studying World War II-era tactics, blockades, sanctions, currency controls, trying to figure out how to navigate modern economic conflicts with their rivals. It is the ultimate example of analog tactics being completely reimagined for the digital era. But obviously, the tools they're dealing with today are anything but analog. Enter this concept called the agent economy. Now, this is a pretty dense bit of Web3 jargon proposed by Hong Kong crypto executive Xiaofeng, but essentially it's a vision for blending AI, tokens, blockchain, and privacy tech to create a completely trustless financial system. In this proposed world, executives envision these token factory banks using programmable money to just entirely bypass traditional banking infrastructure and legal courts. The whole shebang, totally bypassed. So why does this agent economy and the modernization of economic warfare matter to us? Well, as states increasingly use sanctions as instruments of war, the spillovers inevitably cause global commodity and oil shocks. In response to that, sanctioned states try to build resilience using alternative payment systems, like that crypto-based agent economy we just talked about, and they shift their supply chains to bypass blockades entirely. This means private banks and corporations run a massive risk of being weaponized or drawn directly into these conflicts. These digital bypass mechanisms have a very real direct impact on the stability of global markets. Finally, let's pull the curtain back and synthesize all this by decoding the bias. To really get the full picture here, we have to act as neutral navigators. Let's look objectively at the sources we've used today. China Daily relays the government line, heavily emphasizing China's constructive role while naturally omitting Western critiques. The New York Times offers independent analysis, but of course, it frames the narrative around Western concerns, like energy prices. And Xiaofeng, well, he's a crypto executive. His claims are highly promotional and pro-crypto because, frankly, they benefit his industry. Spotting these perspectives is absolutely crucial for critical thinking. So how do we actually spot these narratives that analysts call not quite right? First, keep an ear out for propaganda phrases. When an official claims they are on the right side of history in the Middle East, it implies an objective moral high ground, which usually masks their actual strategic interests. Second, look for omissions. Remember that statistic claiming China had 8 of the top 10 open-source AI models? Well, that completely ignores proprietary models, like GPT-4. It's technically a true stat, but it's heavily spun to imply total dominance. And third, always question utopian tech claims. The idea that a blockchain agent economy is just going to instantly eliminate the need for regulators totally ignores massive real-world hurdles, like existing data privacy laws and cybersecurity risks. And that brings us to the ultimate question. We've seen how China is maneuvering diplomatically in the Gulf. We've seen the staggering investments and the deep trust deficit defining the AI arms race. And we've seen exactly how new digital economies are being built to bypass traditional economic warfare. So I leave you with this. What happens to the global order when those peace talks, the frontier AI models, and the untraceable token factories finally collide? It is a giant, rapidly evolving puzzle. Thank you so much for exploring these interconnected fronts with me today. Keep asking questions, keep analyzing those sources, and I will see you next time.